And hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge back once again with something a little bit different. I'm sorry it's been so long for people following the channel. I've kind of been beset by anxiety and performance issues and just concerning about getting this series perfect. And to be honest, I just thought, screw it, I'm just going to get it done. Today, I'm going to start the launch of a roughly 20 video series, which is specifically a series about emulation, retro game emulation, video games generally and stuff as well. I know that's not what this channel is about. This is a comics channel, but this is something I've spent a lot of my time doing over the last year. It's been a bit of a distraction, and releasing a series on it is going to be a nice bit of closure for me. So, what is this series and what's it going to include? Well, largely it's going to be about emulating video games. The emulation scene and retro game emulation has become huge over the last few years, especially since the pandemic, but especially in the last 2 or 3 years. And it's fascinating, it's fun, I love it, I've really gotten into it. And I decided to do this series now, as otherwise there wouldn't really be an end point for a good time to actually do the series. Unlike my comic guides, which start at a particular date and finish at a particular date, video game emulation is constantly evolving, and this series itself is just a snapshot of a way for me to draw a line under everything I've done so far and hopefully share useful stuff with you. That said, this isn't going to be a detailed series about how to technically do all the emulation in every single possible aspect. There'll be a fair bit of that, but mainly this is a series which is going to encapsulate all the things that I wish had existed in the series when I first started digging into emulation. There literally isn't a one-stop shop series providing an overview from end to end of emulation, and I had to learn, the way most people did, the hard way. And so as a result, I'm making this series to kind of just share that with everyone. It will have some technical bits in it, and especially if you're new to emulation, a lot of it will seem quite technical. But ultimately, this is a guide of how to learn how to do it rather than how to do it itself. In terms of retro emulation, like I say, I love it. I'm playing loads of retro emulated games at the moment. Interestingly, the emulation golden age is almost up, and I think in the next couple of years, we're going to see a lot of problems in this space, which is another reason to do this series now, to give you, the people, a chance to dive in, sort out your game collection, sort out your emulator collection, do all that sort of stuff as soon as possible before essentially there's a bit of a apocalypse of retro game emulation. On that note, I would just say please don't subscribe to the channel if you only want emulation stuff, or rather subscribe for the next month or so, but then these videos are pretty much going to stop. After this 20 video series, the channel is going to go back to comics entirely. For the comic focused viewers, please be patient. After this 1 month series, I'm going to be working on some very big things. There's been a lot of teasers on the channel over the last sort of 5 or 6 months about that anyway, but lots of new things are coming up in the comic space. In the video game space, after this channel is literally just going to be a case of the occasional video here or there, just doing overviews of my physical collection or things like that. If you're interested in that, please subscribe, but if you want specifically emulation content on the regular, this is not the channel you want to subscribe to. That said, later on in this video, I am going to give shout outs to about a dozen excellent YouTube channels in emulation. I would recommend subscribing to them. So I think the first thing to dive into before you even start considering how to emulate games and what platforms to emulate them on and what hardware to use is really just to work out for yourself, why do you want to emulate? I know this is very much kind of like a Sunday newspaper question, like why to emulate, but it's a genuine one and it's a sensible one. It's worth working out your criteria for what games you want to play, what's initially caused this itch that you makes you want to emulate retro games and learn how to emulate, and then think it through and use those as your targets for what you learn going forward. For me, I originally wanted to emulate essentially so I could play the following games on a portable handheld. The first is Guardian Heroes. I loved Guardian Heroes. I have it physically on my Saturn, but I haven't set my Saturn up in about 20 years, and I don't really feel like setting up a console just for that one game. As well as that, I'm aware it's available on Xbox Live, so I can play it on my Series X, and it is amazing, and I love it. But I want to play it on local handheld play. It would just be great to be sitting on the couch in my girlfriend's house, being able to play Guardian Heroes. What a blast from the past! I'd love it. So that's one thing I wanted to play. Another game I wanted to play, which is one of my personal absolute favorites, is Prince of Persia. And this is Prince of Persia from 2008. The original Sands of Time trilogy has been remastered as HD collections on the PS3, and the Forgotten Sands Interquel, which came out at the same time as the Jake Gyllenhaal movie, that's also available on backward compatibility for the Xbox, as is this one, to be honest. But that said, I just want to play this in the palm of my hand. I want to be play it like in the car or on the beach or wherever I want. It would just be awesome to have it. And I do worry about backward compatibility. We'll talk about that in a later video, but compatibility is a bit of a lie, especially the way that Xbox do it, and I do get worried. Staying in that kind of PS3 360 generation, Quantum Theory. If you haven't heard of this, that's fine. No one has. It got critically slated, and apparently it's a rubbish game. I love this. It's like Gears of War through this weird Japanese anime lens. It's awesome. It's very niche. It's not available on backward compatibility or anything like that. I think you can cloud stream it through the PS4, I think, or the PS5. I forget. But again, the point is, I want you to play this locally and on a handheld. Here's a niche PS2 game that you probably haven't heard of, Chaos Legion. It did get a worldwide release, so I've got my own copy here in Europe, and I've played it and I love it. It's only on the PS2. It was never converted to any other format. It's not available on any other platform. It's not available for backward compatibility. It is admittedly quite a grindy game. Imagine Devil May Cry, but without quite as much panache. But that said, it's just really funky and cool. Again, it's the sort of game that I want to be able to play on a handheld, largely because it is a very grindy game. This is the sort of thing I'd want to play half an hour here or an hour on the train or something like that. Just with some headphones on, listen to a podcast, just grinding through. Because I do want to max out all my characters and do the various bits and pieces in it. I never got a chance to fully max it out in the PS2, and I want to play it again. And I don't want to set up a PS2. I want to just have it in the palm of my hand. Extreme G. Now, Extreme G3 is a franchise that I absolutely, well, Extreme G is a franchise I love. Extreme G3 is a game that I absolutely just adore. I once did a 21-hour session on this game. It's available on the PS2 and on the GameCube and on the OG Xbox, but either way, I want it available in the palm of my hand, or even I just want to be able to play it on the big screen. I just want to be able to play it. In that 21-hour session, I finished every single track in this game. I unlocked the fastest bikes possible in the entire game, which I think was something like 1500 cc. I unlocked every additional engine, every additional boost, and I didn't buy a single weapon. I'm very proud of myself. An amazing experience. I love Extreme G. I love racing games generally. Well, anti-gravity or futuristic racing games. And this one is just a forgotten gem. Speaking of which, Extreme G 1 and 2, the prequels, are exclusive to the N64. I believe you can play them now with Nintendo Switch Online, but again, I want local play. I want my own copies on my own handheld. Yeah, I could play these on the Switch with Nintendo Switch Online. Maybe I should, maybe I would, but hey, if I'm getting into emulation, it'd be great to play these. What else are we looking at? Cuboid. This is a PlayStation Network game, and at the time, like 2008, 2009, I remember saying to people, this is just like the old Flash Adobe Player game called Block Saws. It's better than that. It's amazing. It's so much fun. It's a great puzzle game. It's actually a great party game. I don't have many friends anymore, but I remember back in the day, friends used to come round. People would be sitting there drinking beer, having snacks, sprawled all over the couch. You'd have a dozen people wandering around. And this would just be on in the background, people picking up, playing, doing the occasional level, getting stuck in certain bits, shouting out tips to each other. It's a great, fun party game. I really miss having it. And it's a great puzzle game as well. If I could get this running on a local handheld, I'm sure my girlfriend would love it. It'd be great fun. Speaking of ideal games to play with a partner, Ilo Milo, which is available on Xbox Live Arcade. Now, again, I'm conscious this is backwardly compatible and I can play it on my Xbox Series X, and that is great. And that is how I play it. I tend to play it sort of like couch, I'm not going to say couch co-op with my girlfriend because she just gets drunk and sort of yells advice at me and very unhelpful tips in my general direction. But it'd be nice to be able to get this running locally and to get this running on a handheld, and then to be able to give her Isla Milo as a gift that she could play and mess around with and that sort of stuff. It'd be a cool thing to do. And finally, there's a couple of games that are unique to the PS3, unlike Prince of Persia and Quantum Theory, which were on both platforms, but unique to the PS3 are Heavenly Sword and Resistance, specifically Resistance 2, which I absolutely adored. Now, at the end of the day, I want to be able to play both of them. I want to be able to play both of them without needing to have a PS3 setup. I want to play them locally. I want to play them in the palm of my hand without relying on PS Plus or PlayStation streaming or other sorts of stuff. Now, as this series goes on, you'll find that actually I ended up setting up my PS3, and I'll talk through the reason why. The more that I learned about backward compatibility and the myths around it and the lies that have been told by manufacturers. But yeah, this list of games is essentially why I wanted to learn to emulate. It's also worth just kind of being clear of your own values. Like my values on this, I am not a purist. I don't mind if emulation isn't perfect or has various tweaks. I play everything in widescreen, even if it's meant to be in 4:3 aspect. I don't care about frames per second or things like that. I just want it to run well and feel slick. I just want it to play. If you come over here from my comic channels, you're familiar with the term that I use as a type P comic reader who needs everything to be an absolute perfect bulletproof continuity, or a type J reader who's much more relaxed and just reads stuff and kind of stitches it together in their head. I'm more of a type J game player. I just want to have fun. It doesn't have to be 1080p, 4K, Ultra HD, HDR, whatever, etc., etc. I don't need any of that. Also, it's worth making a point about piracy here. I do not pirate, and nor should you. If it's available physically and on a current console, then I will buy it there. Ideally, I'll get it on an official physical, including stuff like limited run providers on eBay and things like that. And failing that, I'll then buy it digitally if I need to. Although I'm always a bit reluctant to do that as digital isn't really owning. And we'll talk a lot more about what that means in digital ownership a lot more throughout this series. I do have an extensive physical collection I rip from, and videos 2 and 3 of this series, keeping in mind this is video 0, will show where I got the majority of my ROMs from. But every video is going to start with a disclaimer saying don't ask me where to get ROMs from because it's illegal, and I'm not going to answer that. In fact, I will just delete those comments. Okay, well, that's enough about me. Enough about my motivations. Let's dive into the sort of stuff that I would recommend you grab pen and paper for. So to start off with, where has this journey gotten me to? What are the devices that I've ended up with after, to be honest, 2.5 years of learning all about emulation? Well, the first one I've ended up with is a Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. You can see it here. We're going to talk a lot more about Retroid Pockets later on in this series because I ended up setting up emulators for 4 or 5 different ones of these. I also have a Logitech G Cloud, which I absolutely love because it's possibly the comfiest bit of hardware ever created by human beings in the history of humanity. But to be honest, I slightly regret buying it. And then I also have a Steam Deck, the king. And there's going to be a few videos where I'll be showing through my Steam Deck collection, and I'll have my actual Steam Deck, and I'll do a Sky camera review, and I'll take you through all my emulators and my games, and I'll show you how I've configured things. I try not to do too many of these overhead things because it's a faff to edit, and it was the thing intimidating me from making this series because I tried to make it perfect. And there's so many well presented, well edited series out there that in the end I just forced myself, screw it, I'm just going to throw something together. So I will film my Steam Deck and I will show it to you, but I'll be doing that in later videos. As mentioned, this series is not technically a guide of how to emulate. The internet's got loads of places for that. I'm going to recommend them all in just a second. But this is going to be a chronicle of my journey, what I learnt, how I learnt it, and where to find resources to learn more. Above all, I'm going to cover those areas which are really hard to understand or learn more about because the internet, unfortunately, wasn't very clear, or things that I've not actually seen covered anywhere else, which again is a surprising number of things. So this is more a guide of how to learn how to do it. As always, fuck around and find out. There is nothing more important than that as a learning principle. Again, I will stress, I will not be providing links to any ROM sites whatsoever, but I will be giving an indication in a couple of videos time as to where I got my ROMs and where I purchased them from. Next, let's dive into where to learn stuff from YouTube. Well, to start off with, here we have the king, Retro Game Core. This is a YouTube channel. He has a website which is fantastic. His social media presence is always really enthusiastic and wholesome and really good. And I've grabbed a couple of images from his thumbnails with his permission to use as just sort of background B-roll stock in my videos, just because his stuff is just such good production value. Like Russ is literally just the man. He is genuinely the godfather of the internet retro emulation community. I started getting into his stuff in like late 21, early 22, back when he was starting. And I'll tell you, honestly, which you're going to find hard to believe, what I did is I basically went to the start of his channel, which at that point I think was a year or so old whenever I started, and I watched every single video that he had done from the beginning in chronological order. That is how I started to learn how to emulate. And I'll be honest, the learning curve is rough. It is high, it's a huge investment of effort. But if you think about the amount of time you spend messing around on social media, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, whatever it is you humans do, if you just spent all that time just watching one channel and learning everything that channel has to teach you, you can do it. It takes a few months, but you can do it. Fortunately, I don't have Facebook or any of that sort of stuff. So for me, literally, it's just whatever YouTube educational videos I want to watch because I don't watch entertainment in that sense. I would recommend really checking out Retro Game Core. Please subscribe to his channel. Don't subscribe to mine if you're into emulation content because, like I say, it's limited. But subscribe to his. Every couple of days drops new stuff. The detail, the professionalism, the quality. This is the channel that you will go to and you'll hear people reference it. A close second is Wolf Den. This is run by a guy called Bob Wolf, who is hilarious. His videos are so good that I will go back and I will show people the little skits he does for his sponsors. That's how much effort he puts in. They're funny, they're well edited, they're clever, and his videos are really earnest and approachable. He's a really, really good YouTuber. Lots of interesting stuff, and he approaches things at a slightly more, I want to say, slightly more human level than Russ from Retro Gamecore, who is so polished and slick. Whereas what Bob does is occasionally just go off in some random passion project, like this is how I made 3D printed thumbsticks or something. Great channel, well worth following. Next up, we've got Blaine Locklear, who's got a really useful channel all about retro emulation, and he's got a really useful website with loads of hints and tips of how to hack basic things. Later on in this series, I'll talk about hacking my PSP and things like that. Blaine Locklear's channel is what I use for that. Absolutely excellent. Let's rattle through the next few. ETA Prime is a really useful channel. Lots of interesting, very articulate overviews of retro emulation handhelds and things like that. Well worth a look, well worth a follow. Taki Udon, excellent channel again, really good grasp of hardware, explaining stuff, really interesting, really useful. He's also someone who's making his own console called a Super Station, and we'll talk about that later when we talk about stuff like FGPA and things like that within the retro community. If that all sounds completely indecipherable to you, that's fine. That's what it is. It's unusual, it's indecipherable, it feels very techy, but I will take you along this journey with me. Another good channel is Ro Taka, as shown here. Useful videos, really interesting. A fun channel to follow here is Wicked Gamer and Collector. Now, Wicked Gamer essentially goes onto random dodgy websites from China like AliExpress and Alibaba and buys random plug and play sketchy shit, like really sketchy shit, which actually is what I'm going to be covering in this series in the next couple of videos, like these sketchy plug and play devices. He just does them constantly. I've got a picture here for a channel called Shandell Explains. I don't even know if this channel is still up and running. This guy, Shandell, has like 5 different channels and he keeps on getting hit with cease and desists and DMCAs and things like that. So when you see his channels around, his videos are good. There's zero fucking around, straight to the point. Do this, do that, do the other. He's not massively technical, but he is very helpful. But yeah, just a bit mercurial, kind of hard to pin down on the internet. But when you see him, he gets my stamp of quality on this. Just Jamie is a fellow Northern British person who does a lot of good emulation videos. He does a lot of stuff on RetroPie and RetroBat, which we'll talk about later in the next video. So stuff that I'm not really very familiar with, but very handy, very thorough, and he's a very helpful guy. There's a channel here, Joey's Retro Handhelds. He's got a YouTube channel and he does a lot of very sensible, helpful videos on there. He also has Joey's Retro Handhelds, which is his own website, which has got a lot of useful stuff on there, well worth checking out. This channel here is Retro Gaming Guy, but actually has now been rebranded to Chase Brogan. It's a guy that used to do loads of retro gaming content, and you will find loads of really, really useful, really helpful retro gaming content on his YouTube channel. Now he's moved more into the slightly different space where he's doing stuff about like pro wrestling and he's got sponsorship in a slightly different direction. But it's well worth bookmarking his channel purely for the historic videos, if nothing else. Mr. Sajano is possibly the nicest human being on earth. Imagine Mr. Rogers squared. Like he's just so super wholesome. He drops a video at least once a day, if not more than once a day, just talking about the retro community or the absolutely latest breaking news. He basically is where I get all my retro gaming news from because he just collates it all and just drops it on the daily in these short, well bookmarked, well referenced videos. Highly, highly recommended. And then the last couple, we've got Retro Handhelds, which is a useful channel here, just sort of interesting background to retro consoles, retro handhelds. And then finally, there is the guy Tech Dweeb, who does a lot of reviews and overviews of hardware and emulation and so on as well. So those are the 15 or so channels that I generally follow and I would recommend. I will point out there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of retro gaming channels. And feel free to pick whoever you want, have your pros, have your cons, have your people you're a fan of, the people you're not a fan of. The only one that I would say, like I say, is the king of the retro internet, is Retro Gamecore. But all the rest of them are relatively subjective. I would strongly recommend all of them, but it's totally up to you. Um, yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Well, with those recommendations out of the way, let's dive into the hardware. When you're looking into retro gaming emulation and this whole scene, there's a few names and a few brands and a few things that will come up a lot, and we'll be talking about them a lot over the coming weeks. I'm going to run through them one at a time. The first one is Miu, Miyo, and the Miu Mini, which is kind of their flagship thing, is king. Everyone talks about this. Everyone raves on about how good it is. I've never owned one. I don't plan to buy one, but the Miu Mini and Miu in general is something that comes up in this conversation a lot. Next, quite possibly the Retro King, is the company Retroid, specifically creator of the Retroid Pocket. Now, I've never actually seen the original Retroid Pocket, but Retro Pocket 2, 3, 4, are they on 5? I think they are. There are so many Retroid models. They are exceptional. Everything about them is fantastic. Please check out the Retro Game Core videos about them. They're not without their controversy, and there have been controversies about them that are captured all over the internet and stuff. But when it comes to pick up, play, learning, all that sort of stuff, Retroid is, in my mind, the market leader. That's a controversial sentence because the next manufacturer, Anbernic, is actually probably a much bigger competitor than Retroid. They have so many different models, it is utterly mind-blowing. And all their models have the most bizarre names like RG355XXSP Plus. I've made that up, but it sounds legit. So many of them have so many weird names, and they're all huge, lengthy acronyms, and it's complicated as hell. And they release about 3 or 4 a month. I'm not even joking. There are hundreds on the market, and Banik has kind of flooded the retro handheld market. And by all accounts, they're pretty good. I've never bought one, but apparently they're pretty good and they're decent. And they are, in terms of volume, one of the really, really big names in the field. Next up, going to slightly more premium era, we've got the AYN, Odin and Loki, and now they're releasing something called Thor. AYN or AIN, which has got a website, AIN Tech, is a really high-end retro handheld manufacturer. Loads of interesting stuff on their website, loads of really useful videos. People rave on about how good they are, but they do cost quite a fair bit. And obviously, when you're throwing in the cost of SD cards, all the peripherals and bits and pieces, like these costs start to mount. And for me, AYN is like it's an expensive premium thing. Do I really want one? I can't really justify it. That said, I did buy one because I'm a total sucker, but more on that later. Next up are the various knockoffs like the Super Console X. Now, I tend to view these in my own mind as being called the Kinhank knockoffs because that was the original manufacturer that made all these. But now on Amazon, there are hundreds, hundreds, if not thousands, of these random Chinese companies with weird ass names that you never heard before, you'll never hear again, that make these weird knockoff consoles that are either handheld consoles or just sticks you plug into your TV and they suddenly play thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of games on there. They exist. You can consider whether or not you want one of these, and we'll talk about it a lot next time. The Logitech G Cloud. Originally, I guess people referred to this as the Microsoft Xbox handheld a few years ago because it seemed Microsoft was really diving into bed with Tencent, the people that make this, to get this made. It unfortunately was just not very popular at all. It's really very much a streaming focused Android device, but I'll do a whole video on it later because I do in fact have one. It'd be remiss of me not to point out existing incumbent handhelds that can be hacked, like a PSP, a PS Vita, and obviously a 3DS and 2DS. Like, they can all be hacked very, very easily to run retro games via emulation with varying degrees of ease. Okay, we are now getting into the expensive space, and here we have the Steam Deck. I don't have much to add at this point in the conversation to a Steam Deck because if you haven't heard of it, I don't really know what to do. It is the world's first handheld gaming PC. It's a market leader. It sold several million, although it is obviously still relatively niche compared to mainstream consoles. It sold several million globally. It is, yeah, the market leader. It kind of defines the standard in terms of performance, the price. It's essentially impossible to beat. I have one. My friends have them because I've kind of teased them and taunted them and baited them into buying them. And it is basically great. We're going to cover it in a lot of videos later on in this series because ultimately it ended up being the aspirational thing that I now use for my most high-end emulation. It's not necessarily a device I take around on the go because it's just a bit too big and cumbersome for me, but it is great to have it. In that same ballpark, there's a whole bunch of other PC handhelds that have come out. There's One X Player, there's the Aya Neo, made by a company called Aya. There's the ROG Ally, often referred to as the official Xbox handheld. And in fact, the most recent version of this has got Xbox branding on it. And there's the Lenovo Legion. And there's the Legion Go and a variety of different permutations. All of these consoles have various versions and models and so on, but they cost a bucket load. Some of them cost well into over £1,000, getting near to £2,000. I mean, this is a whole different realm of gaming. And if you're going to get into this era, I can't help you. I don't have these consoles here. But again, a lot of the channels that I recommended will do deep dives on these. It's important you know that they exist, though. We're now at a point that you can have a gaming PC in the palm of your hands. Speaking of supercomputers in your hands, smartphones. You can use smartphones for retro game emulation. So literally the phone you have in your pocket right now, be it an iPhone or an Android phone or whatever, can be used for retro game emulation. The key thing there is the controls, and I'd normally recommend getting something like a backbone controller. I've never used these, I've never tested these because I don't own a smartphone. But if you do have one, it's absolutely easy. If you don't want to go to any massive amount of effort and you don't mind just something like rough and ready, then yeah, go for it. There are other handheld consoles in this space that you can look at. There's the Absolute. There is, of course, the very bizarre PlayStation Portal. I suppose parallel to that is the Pimax Portal, which again I don't know much about. And there's a bunch of other things. There's the AOK Zoe A2. Again, acronyms are king in this kind of era. There's a Powkiddy ones. There's something called a TJD T101 that I heard about, and there are mini PCs. In other words, there's a loads of different emulation options once you start getting into into the weeds. But the ones that I mentioned to you, the ones that I've just stated and shown you pictures of, those are the big manufacturers and players that you can do some of your own research on. On that, in terms of researching, the one thing I'd recommend doing is really having a think about your own criteria. Like we said at the start of the video, decide what games you're interested in emulating, like why are you into emulating and the idea of it. But then after that, also have a think about what sort of handheld experience do you want? Or in fact, what sort of retro experience do you want? These are the questions I'd recommend you consider. Firstly, do you want a handheld device or do you want one that plugs into your television? Or do you want something that does both? Do you want a landscape device or a portrait device? So a portrait device is something like a Game Boy, a landscape device is like a Game Gear. Me personally, I'm happy with a two-handed horizontal landscape device. Do you want to be able to cloud stream, which things like the G Cloud or the Steam Deck can do? Do you want detachable controllers, so Switch style controllers, which some of the PC gaming handhelds do allow? Do you want a clamshell? And a clamshell is a form factor a little bit like the old Game Boy Advance, the SP, the one that you could flip and close and so on. A bunch of retro handhelds do allow for clamshell form factors. I personally don't like them. An important question is, do you prefer stacked triggers or inline triggers? Now, stacked triggers is the format that you'll see on things like a Switch, where they're stacked so they go away from the player, away from where you're physically sitting in the front of the screen and where you're facing the device. Inline triggers are ones where you have them on the outside of the console and then they move in towards the center of the screen along the same line. Hopefully these pictures should make that clear, but you need to decide what you prefer. I personally massively prefer stacked triggers. Do you want to use light guns in your retro gaming setup? Do you want to play games like Virtua Cop and Time Crisis and stuff? We are going to have a video on light guns later on in the series. And then finally, and I guess kind of importantly, what generation do you want to go up to? Do you want to go up to Generation 5, which is everything up to PS1 and Dreamcast? Do you want to be able to emulate Generation 6, which is PS2 and the original Xbox? Or even Generation 7, which is PS3 and 360? And within this, there's a couple of ones that are a bit quirky and require a bit of careful finesse and understanding of what you're going to do. Specifically, the Saturn can be quite tricky to emulate, and the Xbox can be quite tricky to emulate as well. So these are things you need to think about. Do you want specifically Saturn emulation, or is that game available on the PS1? Do you want specifically original Xbox emulation, or are those games available on a PS2? This sort of thing. Have a bit of a think, not just of the generation, but also the games you want and what platforms they're available on within each generation. And use that to kind of direct your thinking. There's no point in you spending extra money to deal with the extra, I'll be honest, faff of emulating original Xbox games if it turns out the game on that you want to emulate was also available on a PS2 and therefore you could have got it on a cheaper device with a simpler setup. Have a bit of a think. It's really important you set these things out so you know where you're going with your emulation journey. So finally, before we finish off for this particular video, I just want to show you this. It's quite an interesting website, retrocatalog.com. I don't know who makes it. I don't know what their sort of rationale behind making it is, but it's quite a useful website for working out what kind of handheld you might like. It's got all the 233 handhelds here, but you can also like pick the sort of thing that you want. So for example, if you go to categories, you can choose the form factors you like. So I like horizontal. What other filters should we add? So I like horizontal. I want it in Android. What brand would I like? Oh, it's got quite a few here. Let's ignore all those. Let's leave it bright open. Consoles and emulation performance. Let's take it up to PS2. And then let's apply. And here we have it. Here we have 40 horizontal form factor Android handheld consoles that can play PS2. And then it's got, as you can see, all this technical data on all of them. It's a useful website. I've actually never used it because I learned the hard way. I learned by watching several hundred retro game core videos, so I kind of know all this. But what I would say is that if you're interested, yeah, do check it out. It seems to be quite good. Obviously, this is that time of making this video, which is September 2025. Hopefully, it won't turn into some kind of like bizarre porn site or be full of hate speech. But who knows? Right now, this seems really good and highly recommended. And there we have it. Okay, so that is the intro video. This is video 0, just talking about introductions, criteria, research, kind of the plan. as I say, hopefully this video series is going to be helpful. There's about 20 videos planned, so this is going to take up the whole of September pretty much. And yeah, uh, this is a guide of how to learn how to retro emulate. And as much as anything else, this is to kind of draw a psychological line for me under this series, under this thing. The fact that I've been wanting to make this for honestly about 6 or 7 months has kind of been a bit of a psychological blocker for me in terms of producing other content because I keep feeling like this is a big hurdle to get over. And I've kind of forced myself to just make it. It's not going to be as polished or as well edited as the other experts in the field. I can't make a Wolf Den video because they're incredible, but I'll do my best. I'm just going to throw this together. I'll stick with the ethos of this channel. It's stuff that other people aren't talking about in a way that other people haven't said. It's simple, it's clear, it's factual, and it's going to provide you information so you can go off and learn some of your own stuff. Hopefully, you're enjoying it. Hopefully, there's some overlap with my existing followers of people that like comics that will also like retro game emulation. So, yeah, come with me for the ride. And if you're only going to be here for these videos, enjoy the next month. If you're going to dip out for these videos, then come back in a month's time and we'll get back into comics in a big way. Thanks, everyone. Until next time, stay classy.